Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
I think I'm kind of like I think people like my because I'm kind of a unique kind of character.
And I have
you just see how games are possessed so intense, how they mean more.
I'm not putting him on.
I think the U.S. is going to obviously win this.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Nothing But Respect. My name is Aaron Krinsky. I am joined by Patrick Redford, and today we have a very special guest. We have author, journalist, urbanist Ben Schneider. He is a former staff writer at SF Weekly. He has pieces in City Lab, MIT Technology Review, Slate, the Paris Review, and of course The Nation, where he has personally played and beaten George Soros in a game of horse. He also has a new book coming out, The Unfinished Metropolis, Igniting the City Building Revolution. And finally, most importantly, why our listeners should really pay attention to Ben is he is a bucket. I play basketball with Ben. I've actually played basketball with Ben since we were like 5 or 6 years old. We went to Jewish middle school together. I will tell you some theories about why I think our team wasn't that good. Ben is an excellent basketball player and knows a lot about sports in addition to knowing a lot about cities. So we're going to get into all things urbanism, stadiums, kind of like the interesting ways where those intersect with each other on today's pod. Let's get to the topic at hand, which is urbanism. You wrote this book, which Patrick and I have both read some chapters and really enjoyed. The part that when Patrick and I were talking about doing this episode, one of the things that I was confessed to him or said to him is that like I struggle with orienting myself like sort of like politically / what my values are. Like I know what my values are and my politics are, but I can't figure out where those map onto like various urbanist debate, being like, I think I want there to be, more housing, but I don't want the housing to be not affordable. But sometimes you need to build lots of housing to have some of it be affordable. It's just, I get very lost in these specific kinds of things. So I did want to just like state my priors there. Have you encountered this, Ben, this kind of like confusing politics of urbanism?
Definitely. And it's a confusing subject that just touches on so many parts of how we live our lives. So it's definitely understandable that people have trouble kind of navigating the politics of it. Also, there's a lot of strange bedfellows politics in terms of how it actually plays out in like city government level. The sort of progressive moderate divide in like big city governments is pretty confusing on various urban issues, whether it's like housing or bike lanes or transit construction. So I think that is a very, fine place to be. It's part of why I wrote my book, is to help people navigate those kinds of things and have sort of a baseline level of information about kind of how urban planning and policy work and what the implications are of those kinds of decisions. It's a healthy starting place to kind of come at it with an open mind. I think one way that I sum things up, even though things are really complicated, I broadly think more housing and fewer cars are good sort of like slogans that have some holes in them, but generally will lead, I think, in a positive direction.
As someone who is merely in my backyard, haven't really staked out a position in the yes/no wars. Can you just like talk a little bit about like why, I don't know, just as someone who observes this, I feel like the rhetoric between people who are self-described NIMBYs and self-described YIMBYs, I feel like they are aligned on like 95% of what they want, at least like what I've seen. But then like the 5% they disagree about, they like, maybe it's just a narcissism of small differences thing, but like, maybe this is too off topic, but I'm just sort of wondering, like, why do you see, I don't know, do you think this is extant, and like, why do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm here to help with these questions. But I think there are few people who are self-described NIMBYs. That's, I think, an important starting place.
Literally just Steph Curry and his wife.
Yes, infamously, which we might get into. But I think a lot of what you're maybe feeling, Patrick, is sort of the internet discourse around this, in which the YIMBY movement came up basically on Twitter. Like, that's where it started and how it has grown, and honestly gotten in the ears of like policymakers from Twitter, which is one of those crazy like posting to policy pipeline type stories. And in that arena, as we all know, people can be pretty obnoxious. And I think there's a lot of sort of like toxic style of discourse happening. I think the substantive thing that is there is sort of like, there's a version of YIMBYism that is very aggressively free market, like unleash, like end zoning restrictions so that the free market can build a ton more housing. And then there's versions of it that are a little more like loosen the zoning regulations so that the free market and nonprofits and governments can build housing at all income levels. And then there are sort of like people that are just really resistant to housing altogether, the actual NIMBYs. But most of the narcissism of small differences is sort of like, how much should this be led by the free market versus how much should this be led by governments and nonprofits? Yeah, and there's a lot of nuances within that, but that's sort of how that schematizes in my head.
To the policy to like posting to policy pipeline, I'm laughing to myself imagining a scenario where instead of like the cadre of Epstein truthers who kind of like worm their way into, or like Epstein influencers who worm their way into the White House, you have like Trump on a press conference with like Matt Iglesias being like, "We're building the White House 5 more stories. It's going to be fully there's going to be
this kind of happened in the Biden administration. Matt Iglesias was definitely, and Ezra Klein, we're talking to those folks all the time.
Got it. Okay, so it was a different, an earlier posting to politics, like maybe a slightly less flashy one.
Yeah, not as much gold leaf.
Right. Yeah, literally. Okay. On this, just on this NIMBY YIMBY thing, because I think it is interesting around the internet stuff, is like, it does kind of seem like everybody is trying to actively recruit. There's like who can we get on who of the undecided group of people can we get on our team? And so there's this race to it becomes maybe less of like who has the better policy and like who has the better slogans or like who has the better branding exercise, which is where you get into this weird stuff around like I don't want to go too far down this about like, is abundance a useful slogan? Is it not a useful slogan? Is it engendering this like neoliberalism 2 thing, or is it engendering like some optimism about the way to build cities?
Yeah, totally. The branding is a big question in my head, and I don't really know the answer to it. It's interesting how politicians like Zoran Mamdani have embraced a lot of YIMBY ideas, but I don't think would like self-describe himself as a YIMBY. I think because that would be alienating to some people in his coalition who think of that as sort of a toxic brand. But I think that's indicative of the larger sort of like spread of these kinds of ideas that people very much on the left embrace them. Some people in the center embrace them. And it's less of a political identity, I think, than like a way of doing policy that I think has a lot going for it that is, pretty important.
And that actually segues us into the book. The thing I like about the 2 chapters, specifically as it relates to like these sorts of debates, is that like the way that the way that these things are often framed in like the public discourse is this kind of like view from nowhere. Like we are all trying to just build a city in a certain way. And there's a real like sort of a materialism, but also like a historical lens onto it. And we read the 2 chapters about like downtown, broadly speaking, and like trains and transit. And like something that is an echo in both of those chapters is that like these things have gone through cycles. Like things have been better and worse. And there's, I don't want to say like necessarily like a yo-yo effect, but like there's like this Mike Davis quote about like the eternal game. And something that's very striking as somebody like doesn't really have much historical grounding in any of this. And I think this does actually get to the stadium stuff is like that a lot of these questions have been in contest like throughout the years, even with populations, you know, significantly smaller. So I guess just I like that about the book.
Yeah, thanks. I think what I was going for throughout the book is just sort of like not trying to be super normative, like good or bad. This part of the city is good and this is bad, or this city works well, this one doesn't, and just sort of like take discrete pieces and like try to take them apart and understand them and see what their impacts were, both good and bad. And you definitely, there's so much of that in the efforts to build stadiums in city centers over the 20th and 21st century. So much joy has been given by those sports stadiums, but also a lot of like effectively corporate welfare has happened and a lot of displacement of people that lived in the areas where those stadiums were built.
Can you talk about this infinite game quote as it relates to, you know, downtowns more broadly, but then can you also talk a little bit about how stadiums of all kinds play into this larger infinite game model?
Definitely. The infinite game is a concept by Mike Davis, an amazing urbanist scholar who passed away a couple years ago. And basically it's this idea that downtown kind of leaders and business boosters have perpetually pursued like the next shiny object. And, you know, that's a common trope of business and capitalism. But in this context, it involves remaking the city, remaking the built environment, which is, has major consequences and lasts for a long time. So stadiums are sort of part of a larger complex of types of things that business boosters like to do in downtown. So there's stadiums, convention centers, casinos, civic centers, trade centers. Sometimes we don't really call them that anymore, but there are all these sort of like panaceas that are supposed to kind of fix the downtown economy and bring a lot of investment and money and tourism to a downtown that often have not been that successful at that stated goal, but have had other impacts that have been worse.
You draw this contrast. I'm just going to read a quick sentence from the book. It says, you write, for generations, city planners and leaders thought that stadiums or museums or iconic skyscrapers would catalyze downtown's rebirth. But these are symbols of urban prowess, not necessities of urban life. And I find that contrast to be very revealing. So like, why draw the distinction there?
Well, a lot of these moves in the infinite game, just sort of unmade the existing urban fabric and took out a lot of the homes and businesses that were in downtown neighborhoods. So like when you see, a giant plaza or parking lot in a downtown in American city, that wasn't always there. There were densely crowded buildings there that were torn down. And you lose a lot when you replace, a neighborhood with like hundreds of businesses, hundreds or thousands of residents, and put a convention center right there. You might gain some conventions, but the daily life of that city is worsened, and not to mention like the fates of those people who were displaced or the businesses that used to be there. It takes away a lot of vitality from cities.
I really liked the part about how when skyscrapers first came out, everybody was like, these are like gauche and whack, which is, and then it just kind of became this, cut to like, there are now like paintings of skyscrapers and it's like a thought of this thing of beauty. And I think about that with my own, and this again gets into this like muddled thing like my main one that I associate with my main like stadium as eyesore is Chase Center. And like, much as there's this, it's like there was a lot of jokes about it looking like a toilet bowl, and like this like weird, that part of San Francisco is this really weird area. But then I do kind of like reading your book made me spin out into this mindfuck of like, in 20 years, am I going to be just like nostalgic about Chase Center because these things we are always averse to this stuff? How do people kind of navigate I guess, I don't know if it's quite a sticker shock but like the inertia of maybe there is a sort of like NIMBY, an inner, you have to kill the NIMBY in your head. Like there's a inner, like, I liked how this used to be, compulsion that you need to like think through if you want to.
Totally. I mean, I wouldn't say you want to kill the NIMBY in your head, but definitely have him be in conversation with the sort of larger arc of history, and be sensitive to exactly what you're describing. Like, a lot of the most beloved buildings and places were once hated. And I think age helps make buildings look nicer, broadly speaking. Like, getting a little bit of plant cover or like dust on a building, like, just it makes it feel a little bit less, fresh off of the factory floor. And I think Chase Center, in my opinion, kind of feels that way. Like, it is pretty sterile right now, but I think it can kind of grow into itself. I think it'd be nice if they had more, like, they were supposed to do a hotel actually on one of the sides of it where they now have like the team store and stuff. And I think right now it feels a little bit like underbuilt and like could have a little more, activity on the higher levels of the whole center. But I think also Chase speaks to the flip side of what I was saying earlier, which is like a lot of these downtown projects have kind of taken life away from cities. But in the case of basketball arenas, I think often they can really bring life into cities. Like, that particular part of San Francisco, Mission Bay, was like an industrial area for a very long time and did not have a lot going on. And then Chase Center was a big part of that area being now like a place with a lot more people and businesses and life in the city.
And like another one of the newest NBA arenas that just opened is the one in Sacramento, which is and you wrote this about, I forget which examples you use specifically, but like downtown arenas that are like surrounded by parking are like basically the worst possible thing. And what is striking, I guess two things that are striking about the Sacramento arena is like, it's not surrounded by parking and yet remains like quite accessible. So I guess I just want to use that as a way to ask you like a very broad question. Like, can you walk us through like the last sort of 15, 20 years of like stadium urbanism meta, like basically where they're putting it and like what sort of, how they're thinking about questions of like access and use and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I think going way back to like the 60s, which is sort of when like modern stadiums emerged, stadiums like Dodger Stadium, Candlestick Park, a lot of the football stadiums that are on the periphery of cities, the Minneapolis like sports complex there, New Orleans Superdome. That was the era when it was really in vogue to put a huge parking lot around a stadium, and also to combine, multiple sports at one stadium or have like a stadium complex, Oakland Coliseum area being another one of those. And the main sort of thinking in terms of how the stadium would interrelate with the city is that people would drive there. And that's why the parking lots were there. There were, no businesses around, no transit, no kind of like mixed use development around there. And I think since that point, there's been just a gradual return to the sort of ideal of Wrigley Field or Fenway Park, these the historic baseball stadiums that are like really, really tightly embedded in their neighborhood and have a lot of charm and contribute a lot to the surrounding neighborhoods. And San Francisco's whatever it was, Pac Bell back when it opened, and Petco Park in San Diego, Camden Yards in Baltimore, sort of these canonical examples of those stadiums that really tried to get back to that ideal by kind of taking away the parking lots, putting in development nearby, and like making sure it's like really close to transit. And those have all been really successful examples that have then led to more such ideas. What's been interesting, I think, more recently is like now pretty much any stadium development has like a mixed use component to it. Like as we just saw, we were just talking earlier about the Commander Stadium that just got passed by the DC City Council. So it's like nowadays, like no one will build a stadium without trying to make it a larger real estate play, because they understand what it's amazing to think that people didn't understand 50 years ago, which is that if you're bringing 80,000 people to a place, like you can make more money off of them if they're like shopping and dining and like
if you
staying in a
also
hotel.
own the
Yeah,
buildings around.
and like parking is not like a really good use of real estate, etc. And so I think like I love the Giants Stadium in San Francisco. Like I think it's a kind of an ideal example of a modern stadium. But some of the more recent ones have had like it's a little more of like a theme park feel, like at LA Live, for instance, or the St. Louis Cardinals have a similar thing at their stadium. Philadelphia now has something like that at their stadium complex. So I think it's cool to see that there's just this universal recognition that like parking lots aren't great, and like it's good to have some life and some other things going on near the stadium. But there's definitely could be some better design and architecture and more interesting uses of those spaces.
So when you see like the Bills Mafia jumping on tables and having like truly what looks like the best time in the world in a parking lot, is there part of you being like, God damn it, they're manufacturing consent, they're making parking lots seem awesome?
No, I'm strictly pro fun.
Okay.
I'm never gonna let my urbanism devolve into authoritarianism. But this is why football stadiums are not good for cities. Basically, I think that's like a pretty solid rule. Like football should be in the suburbs. You need the parking lot. Like you don't want to take away the tailgating culture. And it's just there's so many people and there's so few events that it's not really workable for. It doesn't really like contribute to the life of a city. Whereas like a basketball arena, you've got tons of NBA games, tons of WNBA games, and then tons of concerts. And what's interesting with football stadiums is like, not only is it just football and like, two club or two like world's soccer matches a year. Sorry, I don't know how to speak soccer.
Yeah.
World soccer is what it's called.
Now you nailed it, yeah.
But also there's only like 3 artists that can fill that stadium.
Right.
Taylor Swift and Beyonce and like Bruce Springsteen, and so it's just not getting activated that much.
What's maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, but like, can you think of a stadium that strikes you as like the worst in America from like an urbanism perspective?
I think I don't love the Detroit stadium complex. Like
This is the new one, right?
Well, there's like I'm not sure when they were all built, but there's like the basketball, baseball, and football are all kind of in one area on the edge of downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to the infinite game. Like that was, I think, an understandable decision when Detroit was like really struggling economically and needed something to bring people downtown. But those stadiums have so much parking right around them, and they're right in the middle or right next to the main part of downtown. And like, even if they were like, I feel like more distributed, that might be better. It can be really overwhelming with these stadium complexes that have even more parking than one stadium would. And then again, the football stadium being there, I feel like is not great.
Wow. I'm looking at an overhead view, and you're right. There's like 6 or 8 blocks right in what appears to be prime downtown Detroit, or at least where the words downtown Detroit appear in Google Maps, that are just like entirely parking lots. Like, yeah, that's ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've spent a little bit of time in that area, and I get what you're saying, this like theme park feel versus ingrained urban experience, because there is just, I mean, and it's almost or kind of like a dumb guy barometer I often use is like for stadiums is like how long does it take from like the game is done to you're like on to your next activity? And at Barclays Center, for example, like it's incredibly quick. And actually,
Forma Pasta Factory is like 7 minutes away.
Literally, like you can like watch Breonna Stewart buzzer beater and then like have some garlic scampi within in the same 30 minutes, really.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
And MSG is the same way, honestly. MSG, they spit you out really quickly. Yeah. But some of these other places, like it's almost like a exponential problem. It's like then you're walking around, then you're walking in front of the cars are moving slowly. Like it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
This is sort of off topic, but in my because I was traveling last fall for college football, and they all had a very interesting set of ways in which the stadiums would interact with the places. It's very unique because it's like a small town devoted to this thing where it's totally different. But I did see all these interesting ways that tailgating like revolved around the city. So to your point, or like to a point, like you don't need to be so sacred about like what the way we're going to have fun before a game is. We are going to like stand in an empty parking lot and drink beer. As much as that is really fun.
Yeah, like a lot of tailgating for college football games happens in the quad, which is a really cool, like mixed use thing to do. And college football and college sports, urbanism, and just the urbanism of colleges in general is really interesting. And it's not something I got into in my book at all, but that's like one of these cliches of urbanism is like college is this time in life when you can get around without a car. For basically everything you need to do. And it's like this thing that people kind of chase for the rest of their lives and are really bitter that they can't experience, after they graduate.
That sort of reminds me,
part of that.
To get slightly further off topic, like I was in Vegas for a while earlier this year, and something that struck me about Vegas is that something people like about it is that it is like theoretically walkable, that it's like this great place to go on vacation because like no one would ever think of renting a car in Vegas or anything, but like, similar to something that you wrote in the trains chapter about like this like sort of grotesque privatization of what should be public, like the version of walkability present in Vegas is this like horrifying, like balkanized, you have to go through all these luxury malls, and like the way that you are shunted to just like, I mean, in this case, like literally make space for capital is like crazy making. Yeah.
There's an amazing term for the aerial walkways in Vegas, and like Minneapolis and Dallas has these too. It's called the analogous city. It's the city kind of above the city. And when you're walking around the Vegas Strip, you're very seldom on the sidewalk. And when you're on the sidewalk, there's nothing going on the sidewalk. You have to go through the maze of the casino to get to, any kind of businesses. I don't know what you call them, like weird cafeteria places and Givenchy
retailers populated by Australians.
Calvin Harris residencies. And it's interesting now with the Allegiant Stadium out there. It's a perfect extension of like that kind of urban development. Honestly, it's really close to the Strip, but it's like impossible to get to on foot, and it's like a really scary looking building.
Yeah, I'm just imagining someone who lives in New York or whatever, like looking at, like, say you're staying at, I don't know, the Luxor or whatever. You're really into Egypt and spending like $39 on a hotel room, and you love that smell of cigarettes, and you're like, great, we're like 2 blocks away from Allegiant. And you like walk out of the hotel and look at it, and you're like, I will experience medical death in like 3 ways if I try to walk to this fucking stadium. Like I'm going to get hit by a car, bake onto the surface of the earth.
Gamble away all my money, yeah.
Speaking of Vegas, like the A's stadium is currently underway there. And something that stadium project shares with like a lot of other new stadium projects, including the Commanders one we brought up, is that like the public's money is being used to build it, and they don't want that to happen. And as a veteran, as someone whose team was almost moved until the NBA successfully held the city government hostage, I want to talk about like the financing aspect of stadiums, because this is something that I think this is where the sort of myth of urban development most directly interfaces with normal ass people, because you are told like it is important that the Kings have a building to go 35 and 47 in every single year, and you have to pay money because we will revitalize downtown, and that like basically they're saying the psychic benefits are worth this expenditure. And that they also sort of make this mixed use kind of case. So how true is that? And what's sort of the evolution of that idea?
Yeah. Well, the research is clear, the economics research, that stadium subsidy deals don't really pay off for the public. They're giveaways to ownership groups, and it's basically accelerating investment that would have happened anyway. Like usually, if you're going to subsidize something, you have to have like the but for clause to the equation. But in this case, it's like these projects are happening; these teams are making money either way. So that's sort of the baseline, like academic and kind of like urbanist thinking around it.
And
that
can I want to stop you there because I just want to lay out like what was the thinking, like kind of if you were going to intuitively sell it to, like Milwaukee is going to intuitively, is the idea that we are going to build a bunch of housing, which is going to then, and you're going to pay a tax on it, but don't worry, you're going to make that back because we're going to bring down the cost of your rent because of the free market's going to bring the cost down? Is that the idea?
It's as convoluted as that, but I mean, you got to remember the housing part is a pretty new part of the equation. Like going back, even a few years ago, that wasn't really talked about as part of these stadium deals. But basically, I think it's just one of those things where it's like teams started asking for it and cities started saying yes, and then they pretty much all started saying yes. I actually looked into this before we had this pod conversation, and I found that very few stadiums in recent years have not received subsidies. That's actually like the exception. And I think it's an important thing for like journalists to like highlight that, and also the fact that it can be done without subsidies. Like for instance, Chase Center, MetLife Stadium in New Jersey are two big ones that were fully privately funded. And especially now, like, the last 10 years, the NFL and NBA have done really well. MLB doing okay. And all these soccer teams too are like doing really well. Again, I don't particularly understand that whole piece of it, but
it's basketball. You kick it. It's very similar.
Well, there's world soccer and then there's national soccer.
There's two leagues.
Oh, you don't even want to know how many leagues there are.
You don't want to know how many leagues there are.
But I think the psychological piece is really important. Like, people are very emotionally attached to their teams, and so are elected officials. Even like Governor Kathy Hochul, huge Bills fan, was instrumental in getting their stadium deal through.
And that was like $500 million of the public's money.
I think it was like 800. Yeah, it's huge. And I think in some places like Buffalo or Cleveland that are economically struggling cities, like there's somewhat more of a case to be made that like the team might actually leave. The Bills is like, they're such an iconic team, especially with Buffalo. It'd be hard to imagine, but that's sort of always the fear, right? Like what happened to Oakland, that if you don't give subsidies, they'll find a place that does, and especially a place that does, that has a better media market. The big media market cities are in a much better position to be like, actually, we're not going to give you subsidies because like we know you're not going to leave. You're not going to find another New York City in which to start a football team.
Well, that's an interesting thing, is like there's this threat, this sort of like psychic threat that like the team as you know it will not exist anymore. But like, I guess the Oakland thing aside, like I feel like relocation has really been on the decline over the past few decades, right?
Yeah, I haven't looked into that like systematically at all, but that seems right. Like I think it's harder to do, and like I think people are maybe more attached to their teams. Like it's been generations of these teams being in these same cities. Like if you look back to like the 60s, 70s, like the NFL was pretty new, the NBA was pretty new. And like MLB was like expanding across the country. It was like in previous decades, it wasn't that long ago when these leagues were young, and it wasn't like so established that this team is in this city.
That's interesting. And I think like is another really key important piece of historical context, because if you're just like one of these millions and millions of 28-year-old Sacramento Kings fans who just assumes that this is like this eternal institution, and like you don't understand that like relocation has been their entire sort of history. It's like you can think of these sort of like their financial status as like totally enshrined and not like kind of up for contest. And I think if you're like a, I don't know, politically minded urbanist or sports fan or whatever, like that should be sort of energizing to think through, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, that's, to circle back to the premise of my book, it's just like encouraging people to like think about their city as like something that doesn't have to be exactly as it is today. And certainly like stadiums, in the worst cases, ought not to be. And in those cases, there are big money forces that want to change stadiums. Like all these stadiums that are surrounded by parking lots, the owners want to change that situation, but probably still want to take a lot of taxpayer money to do that.
It seems pretty clear to me, despite my murky understanding of where I politically align, that these tax subsidies should not be happening for these fucking billionaire people. Is there any sense that we are going to see less of that? Or
all these examples I just cited are like pretty new. The other one is SoFi Stadium in LA was fully privately funded. So I think like politically speaking, like if it's crazy that Chicago is doing what it's doing with they're offering. I'm not actually sure what the status is, but there have been talks about huge subsidies for the White Sox and the Bears. There was a big downtown project that the Bears ultimately rejected. So I'm not totally sure what the status is there, but I think if you're talking about a city like Chicago, a city like LA, San Francisco, New York, that have these really iconic teams that are not going anywhere and are not going to find a better market, I feel like politicians should be in a position to say, no, we're not going to give you subsidies because we know you can't and won't leave. And even as I'm saying that, it's unfortunate that Chicago apparently could not, get the backbone to do that. But I would like to think that could be a trend, for big market cities to sort of lead that and see if you can kind of turn the tide of that being the expectation. DC is another city where it's like you'd think that they could also kind of step up and say we're not going to give you subsidies or we're not going to give you huge subsidies. That could be a starting place.
Well, the DC deal is a really good illustration of this exact point. Like everyone should go read Chris Thompson's good story from I guess yesterday when this comes out on the Commanders. There's like the minimum subsidy just like for overall tax revenue not coming in is like $7.5 billion, but could be in the 20 billions. And like
crazy.
The striking thing about that is that like there's all these polls conducted of all these residents who are going to lose money because of this. And it's like super majorities of normal people like oppose this democratically. And yet like the city council passed it 11-2. And like, that is like one of the hindrances is like, if this actually was under any sort of like direct democratic control, like the realities of this would be totally, totally different, but it's much easier to allegedly just buy off like 10 guys as opposed to, 100 million or whatever.
Well, and no one wants to be the politician that's trying to push away, everyone's favorite team. I think that is a really hard position for leaders to be in. And I don't really know what the like answer would be there. I think you need to have like a really strong united front to like explain why, they're taking that stance and like have some kind of better idea on the table where it's like, we could give you less subsidies and have the same type of thing. But yeah, it's hard politically to make that leap.
Oh, so one of my questions is like, all this is taking place in an American context, and we're talking about like, organizing and political will, and like one place where that exists in greater supply is literally everywhere else in the world. And so I'm just sort of wondering like how do like stadium financing deals and how does all this work in like other countries that don't have America's like sort of suite of neuroses and also like our level of car culture? Like, is this better in other places?
That's a good
well,
question.
I'd love to do a freelance story for Defector on this, so we can talk after Patrick. The answer is I really don't know about how stadium financing works in other countries, but I have seen some stadiums in other countries, and broadly speaking, they're very intimately connected to the built environment. It's actually kind of a fun exercise if you were to just like Google image search like Premier League teams. Or like the like main stadium in Buenos Aires. Like they're just like 10 feet away from the like wall of the stadium. There's like a apartment building. And there's like, a tiny walkway between the city and the stadium, which seems a little claustrophobic, honestly, but it is, they just have very different ideas of how much space you need for things in a lot of other countries.
Well, speaking of cars, let's talk about the transit stuff, because it's a little bit less connected to stadiums and sports directly, but I think there are some fun indirect ones. It's funny, Pat, when we were going through the doc or going through your book, Patrick wrote this quote that I'm about to read, which was the same exact quote that I keyed in on, because I do think there's a real like sports angle here, which is you wrote, Ben, in regions like the Northeast, where trains are time competitive with cars and planes, railroads shrink the psychic distance between cities, creating social and economic ties that wouldn't otherwise be possible. Friendships, family connections, creative collaborations, and sports rivalries, the things that give meaning and purpose in life, can exist in a wider geographic radius. And I was thinking about that. I agree. I think that's spot on. And I have long felt that, and I think we've even talked about this on the show, that just for whatever set of reasons, like NBA rivalries matter more on the East Coast than they do in various other places, which is going to be very funny this year because all these East Coast teams are just busted. But I then like looked it up because I want to do some kind of like see if I can do my own research, so to speak. And Philly and New York are about 94 miles apart. Two cities that I see as having like a historic, beautiful rivalry, sports rivalry. Not the only two teams that rival with each other, but like Philly fans fucking hate Boston or New York fans. SF and Sacramento is shorter distance. It's 84 miles apart. And yet, there have been some rivalries between San Francisco and Sacramento, but like they're sort of manufactured more by like both being good in the same era. The vitriol, I just feel like is not anywhere near the same. And I do really feel like the interconnected, I basically want to really key on the word sports rivalries, which is like the public transit component of all of this makes sports rivalries feel more powerful.
Totally. Yeah. And I didn't get to write about this in the book, but one thing I loved learning about when I was doing the research is that back in the day when college sports were the main event, all of those rivalries, those, Civil War rivalries, if that's what they call them, like the state versus the university of, those were all powered by trains. Like the kids from one school would take the train to the kids from the other school, like, Alabama, Clemson, whatever, Harvard, Yale, et cetera. And so that's like the basis of sports rivalries, basically. It's just like proximity, because you're going to see them multiple times a season or once a year on a regular basis. And I think pro sports rivalries kind of emerged in a similar way. And then of course, like the jet age changed the equation and like made it so you can have cross country or farther distance rivalries. But it's like, it's not like a coincidence that like trains are connected to rivalries. Like that's how they emerged.
Yeah, I think I really like this theory, Harry. It makes like very intuitive, sort of like psychic sense to me. And like the thing about driving, like any interaction with a car is like inherently like a very like atomizing experience. Like you are the master of your own reality. Other people exist merely as like hindrances. Like there's no interaction that isn't adversarial, I guess. And like one would maybe think that could lend itself to like more rivalries, just because it's like everyone is sort of mean and fucked up in the same way, except like the act of driving somewhere naturally like sort of precludes the possibility of other people. Like there isn't any of that, like seeing yourself and your rival, which I think is like actually what makes sports rivalries good.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally. And there is something too about that, like again, take Philly, New York, or Boston, New York, which is like they have found this special alchemy where they are their own places with personalities and things that they can hate about the other group. You know, Boston as a city has a distinct vibe. New York as a city has a distinct vibe. But there's enough, you know, transmissibility between the two where you can get there really quickly or whatever. I mean, it's the same, like, you know, like, I guess like the Dodgers and the Giants, that's a good sports rivalry. But like,
and it would be so much better with high-speed rail.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could go.
I mean, I feel like Warriors Lakers would pop off in that situation.
Seriously. I like the idea, actually. How about this, of like Maverick Carter high speed rail investment, and then LeBron goes to the Warriors to kind of like lock in the rivalry, you know.
I mean, this might be the only way we fund it.
Yeah, literally.
If we get the Lakers and the Warriors involved, like,
if LeBron starts talking about the San Joaquin Valley a lot and how like Merced is actually very dope this time of year, then you know it's happening.
Yeah.
I've long wanted high speed rail. I actually knew we were going to get there in 45 minutes.
I left several comments at the Bakersfield City Council meetings in 2012. Maybe you're not familiar with my work.
I mean, the way things are looking, LeBron might still be in the league when high-speed rail opens. You never know. 45.
If he's a Warrior, I hope so, man. I hope he's still on the all the whatever kind of research chemicals he's on, allegedly. All right, let's. We skipped over this, but I wanted to do a little helping our audience kind of situate our you know, how we're supposed to feel about the Yimbys and the Nimbys as basketball fans. So if you were to like, if there was a 5-on-5 basketball game played between the kind of like monstars of the Yimby movement on the court and the monstars of the NIMBY movement on the court, how do we think that game is going down?
I don't know too much about the strategy or the personality of the different players, but what I know for sure is that the NIMBYs are going to be like median age like 75, and the Yimbys are probably going to be like 30 something on average. So that data point alone suggests that the Yimbys would win, but you never know. I mean, crazier things have happened.
I'm thinking about this in slightly more psychic terms. Like when I think of NIMBY Hooper defined, you know, in any sort of vaguely creative way, the first person that comes to mind is Dikembe Mutombo.
Me too. Yeah.
The classic "not in my house," basically, almost literally not in my backyard.
That's a good kind of NIMBY for sure.
Yeah, I think of Kawhi. I don't know which one he is actually, but like, the thing with the Uncle Dennis thing, he's demanding subsidies. He's basically saying like, I will not come to your town. Yeah. I will not do abundance with you unless you are privately giving me money. So maybe he actually is like the ultimate Yimby Hooper.
Well, isn't he like an arborist though? I mean, that seems like
famously.
That seems like kind of a NIMBY thing to do, you know?
Yeah, you guys like that stuff, right?
Prune your trees.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Kawhi could be like, do you remember that brief attempt or that probably only existed online, but to like use digital kind of like proto AI to put a skyscraper in the Sunset neighborhood in San Francisco?
Oh, yeah.
They were like, we're going to like 3D render a skyscraper on like 37th and
I mean that actually wasn't just like a stunt. Like that was an actual proposal that was put out there.
Okay,
it doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, that was a crazy moment.
That skyscraper is Kawhi. He's like he's like, I will bring you some stuff, but you are gonna have to like grease a lot of you know, someone's got to subsidize my shit. You know, I will go to the highest bidder, and I'm gonna kind of see him off on your team. And then of course Steph Curry as if Steph is the captain, if it's like Steph, you know, Dolph Shays, Bob Cousy, Bill Russell, I think probably the Yimbys win. Pat Connaughton is I don't know if you guys know about this, but he's a huge developer in the Milwaukee area. Like really? huge.
The Tobias brothers too are big developers.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait. The Tobias brothers.
Or sorry,
Tobias Harris. The Harris brothers. Okay. I was like the Tobias.
Tobias. I don't know his brother's name. But they're actually doing something interesting where they're doing developments using this new like affordable housing streamlining thing that they did in LA. So I think they are focused on affordable housing, which is cool.
He's a team player, yeah.
Do you think Victor Wembanyama knows what abundance is?
Yes.
I think he does.
That man seems pretty well read.
Yeah.
I feel like he was probably at some point given being like, if you are ever asked about this, here is like how you deflect and don't stake out of position.
Yeah. Or
his media training is top tier.
There's like the Kevin, like Wemby in the lab with KG. It's like leaked photos. Wemby sitting down with Derek Thompson. They're getting busy.
Well, what's that ad with LeBron like reading a book but like secretly playing Candy Crush or
yes,
something?
very cursed.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
We need that for Wemby, but reading Abundance.
But he's like, he's listening to Blowback season 6. We kind of talked about the YIMBYism. I had a question from before that we jumped our YIMBYism on Twitter, which is like, there is this funny thing where basketball found a home on Twitter. Talking about basketball found a real serious home on Twitter. Arguing about urbanism also seemed to find a home on Twitter. And so have many other things, but these are two, like when I think of like two of the types of things that people would debate on Twitter feverishly beyond like politics and whatever, it was basketball and NIMBYism and YIMBYism. Do you have any sense of why urbanism found a home on Twitter?
It's interesting. I mean, it's just like a classic 2010s moment, I think, with like the sort of idealism of social media being a place for like like-minded people to connect about positive things or like substantive things. And I think urbanism kind of did that as much as any other kind of like subgenre that people talk about on the internet. So I think that's a big part of it. It's just like a subject that people do feel very passionate about and are like seeking affirmation of their views. And social media is like a great place for that historically. And, that utility has melted away a little bit. But I think there's still a little bit of that, Obama era optimism spirit on urbanism blue sky at the very least. Yeah. There's been a pretty big migration, I will say.
I also think there's a sort of like a coherence between like the topic and the form in both basketball and urbanism. Like if you're just like yelling at someone about like Jason Tatum's PER or like whether or not the Sixers need to run more like Jared McCain pick and rolls, you are having like the same effect on the actual thing you're arguing about as like two guys screaming at each other about like whether or not the new towers need to be 3 floors or 33 floors. Like there's sort of an equal level of almost powerlessness, but you're both, I don't know, like maybe you feel bought into both topics in the same degree, if that makes sense.
No, Patrick, you're cooking right now. I that really unlocked something in me about like, there is also this kind of incredible, like 3 levels of like stupidness you can talk about both Twitter and urbanism, where you can be like, this building is ugly, but you can also be like, the housing regulations of this have doomed the city of Toronto to a death spiral. In the same way that you can be like, I love Allen Iverson, or you can be like, he shot the Philadelphia 76ers out of the 2001 finals. Like you can really like go a million different ways.
People need places to blow off steam, and things to blow off steam about. And I think basketball and urbanism offer that, and Twitter offers that.
Also, the sort of epistemological mode of basketball Twitter has like trended towards either like GM brain or real hooper shit. Mm-hmm. And so I'm mapping this debate onto urbanism. It totally makes sense to me because on the real hooper end, you have people being like, that building's a bucket, like architecture heads basically being like, you guys, look what they took from you. Like 1930s Cleveland was like beautiful. And then on the other hand, you have people pulling up that Austin housing graph and being like, if we're building 1,200 apartment units and they're separated from the train lines by this, we can really maximize our championship window, which is like, I guess your rent going down in 10 years or whatever.
Totally. There's such a like right brain, left brain, like data guy versus like architecture guy, Twitter urbanism archetype.
That's so funny.
Interesting. We'll have to map this out more.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ben, thank you for coming on. We've talked we've talked a little bit about the book broadly, and everybody should go check it out. And from the chapters that we've read, it's very fun. And like the two things I'll say. One, I totally agree, Patrick, about the just the historical context was really helpful. The other thing I really liked is like it's incredibly efficient. Like I feel like every three sentences, I'm like, I just learned like 700 things. So it's but not in a way.
When you ask ChatGPT to write it for you, that's how it spits it out. So.
We didn't talk about the trains chapter as much, but I really just do want to underline like that really clarified like a lot of things. I mean, it made me really mad. And like there's this, just to tease it, there's this bit in there about how like track volume in the US is like half of what it used to be. And I think there's something sort of empowering there of like things used to be different and better, and all this stuff is historically contingent. And so I really like that chapter, Ben.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, thank you both. That means a lot that you enjoyed the chapter. And you can get the book on Amazon, bookshop.org, hopefully at your local bookstore. I'm not totally sure what their distribution is going to be like, but that would be awesome to see it in local bookstores throughout the lands of Nothing But Respect listeners. So,
AKA Greenlight Books and
some bookstore in Oakland.
Dog-eared Books on Valencia.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, and we will see everybody next week.
Hell yeah.